The family of a well-known Australian businessman was found dead in their family mansion. From the very beginning of the investigation, detectives faced a nearly complete absence of evidence and suspects. However, soon unexpected details emerged in the investigation, altering the course of the case and revealing a truth that not only shocked the relatives of the deceased, but also stirred public outcry. Min Lin and Yun Lin had immigrated to Australia from China to pursue higher education. They met during their time at the University of Sydney and later got married, establishing their permanent residence in North Epping. In 1994, their daughter Jun Lin, commonly known as Brenda, was born, and she was soon joined by two sons, Henry and Terry. In 2002, the Lin family opened a kiosk on Rose Street, selling various news publications, newspapers, and magazines. Gradually, their small business began to prosper and generate a substantial income. The family was highly respected within the community, known for their hard work, as their store operated 7 days a week, and they were seen as loving and caring parents. Their eldest daughter, Brenda, grew up to be beautiful, intelligent, and kind. Henry was very sociable and had a strong interest in sports, while the youngest, Terry, kept up with his older siblings. The strong family bonds were reflected in their outward success as their business thrived. The family's income from the store had already reached around $1 million per year, making the Lin family one of the most prosperous and respected in North Epping. Having achieved success in their business, Min Lin and Yun Lin assisted their relatives from China in relocating to Australia. Irene, Lily's sister, had been living in the same house as her sister and her family since her move to Australia, helping to raise the children. Min Lin organized the relocation of his parents, and the elderly couple settled in Maryland, located a 30-minute drive from North Epping. He also helped his sister Kathy and her husband, Liam bin Eggsy, known as Robert, with their move. Kathy and Robert, after an unsuccessful attempt to start their own restaurant business, settled in North Epping, living just a few minutes' walk from the Lin family's home, and both of them worked at Min Lin's store. On the morning of July 18, 2009, the store's regular customers were alarmed to find it closed without any prior notice. This was highly unusual since the store had always been open 7 days a week. Concerned about this, one of the store's loyal patrons contacted Kathy to inquire about the reason for the store's closure. Kathy, unaware of why her brother hadn't shown up for work and failed to notify anyone, suspected that Min Lin might be ill. In response, Kathy and her husband went to her brother's home. Upon approaching the house, they discovered the front door unlocked. Inside the house, when they reached the second floor, they were met with a gruesome crime scene involving the Lin family. Kathy immediately reported the discovery to the police, leading to the revelation of the Lin family's demise. Police swiftly arrived at the scene and found the lifeless bodies of 43-year-old Yun Lin, commonly known as Lily, her two sons Henry, aged 12, and Terry, aged 12, and Terry, aged 9, as well as her 39-year-old sister Yun Bin, known as Irene. Blood splatters were discovered throughout the house, from floor to ceiling. In the initial hours of the investigation, the police became suspicious of Min Lin, the head of the family, as his body was not found. During the examination of the house, investigators also noted the absence of another family member, the eldest daughter, Jun Lin, known as Brenda. Upon inspecting the crime scene, it became apparent that the assailant had not entered her room, as there were no traces of blood and the room remained untouched. 2 hours after the police arrived at the scene, a man's body was discovered under a blanket on a bed next to Lily, indicating that Min Lin, the family's head, was not a fugitive but had become a victim of the attack. To ascertain the identities of the deceased, investigators had to turn to forensic examination, as their faces were so disfigured that their relatives could not identify them. The police began a thorough examination of every corner of the crime scene, but at that point they had no leads regarding the motive for the crime or the identity of the perpetrator. Initially, upon examining the bodies, investigators believed that the assailant had shot the victims in the face from close range, given the extent of their disfigurement. However, later the results of a forensic examination revealed that the victims had been brutally bludgeoned to death with a blunt, heavy object, likely a hammer. Additionally, 4 out of the 5 victims exhibited signs of asphyxiation, indicating that they had been strangled before succumbing to their injuries. The time of death was estimated to be between 2 a.m. and 5 a.m. Police learned that on the evening of Friday, July 17, 2009, a large family dinner had been organized at Min Lin's parents' home, attended by the entire family, including Kathy and Robert. According to the parents' accounts, the dinner had proceeded in a warm and pleasant atmosphere, with everyone enjoying their time together. The only family member absent was Brenda Lin, who was 15 years old at the time. She had left on a school trip to study the French language in New Caledonia with Cheltenham Girls High School, and had learned about the brutal murder of her entire family through Facebook. This incident created a media frenzy and shocked the community. Many North Epping residents were personally acquainted with the Lin family and were deeply saddened by their tragic demise. The public funeral for the Lin family took place at Olympic Park on August 8, 2009, with over 1,000 people coming to bid farewell to the family. After the funeral, despite Min Lin's parents offering Brenda to live with them, Kathy and Robert insisted on taking custody of the girl, citing their advanced age, and swiftly formalized guardianship. Brenda returned to school, and Kathy and Robert took over the management of the store. The police continued their investigation, which was filled with rumors and speculations. One theory suggested that the initial intention of the perpetrator might have been a robbery gone awry. Another theory implied a connection to the Chinese mafia, as a few days prior to the murder, Min Lin had witnessed an armed robbery of a cash-in-transit vehicle near his store. It was believed that he was killed to prevent him from testifying, and the rest of the family became unintended victims. However, the investigation could not find any evidence linking the crime to the robbery witnessed by Min Lin. The idea of a home invasion was also swiftly ruled out, as there were no signs of forced entry, and nothing had been stolen from the house. During the investigation, it became evident that the murders had been meticulously planned. The absence of any foreign fingerprints in the house, except those of the family members, led investigators to believe that the killer likely wore gloves. Given that the murder weapon was not found at the crime scene, investigators concluded that the perpetrator had carefully planned the crime and had taken steps to dispose of the murder weapon. Detectives hypothesized that, to maintain control and prevent the hammer from being dropped during the attack, the assailant likely had it attached to their wrist in some way. At the crime scene, 24 bloody shoe prints were discovered, which were determined to correspond to a shoe size of 9. 5 in American measurements, indicating that the assailant acted alone. Investigators speculated that the crime was most likely committed by someone close to the family, who had access to the house, was familiar with the layout of the rooms, knew the location of the circuit breaker and alarm system, and was aware of Brenda's absence from the house. This idea was supported by the fact that the killer did not enter Brenda's room, as no traces of blood were found in there. The brutality of the crime led investigators to consider that it was driven either by intense hatred or overwhelming passion. Despite their suspicions, investigators still had no concrete idea of who might be involved in this crime. Extensive interrogations of potential witnesses yielded no valuable information. Min Lin's parents, as well as Kathy and Robert, were questioned multiple times, but no significant information regarding potential wrongdoers was obtained. Kathy and Robert held a press conference organized by the police, urging the public to share any information they might have about the case. However, for several months, the investigation seemed to be at a standstill. The immense public pressure on the police demanded a swift resolution to find and punish the perpetrator. Consequently, a special task force was established within the police department, consisting of the most experienced investigators. They decided to re-examine all the evidence in the case that had not been thoroughly analyzed before. During the review of a recorded phone call between Kathy and the emergency services operator, towards the end of the call, the police noticed some unintelligible muttering in the Cantonese dialect. This recording was quickly translated, revealing a woman pleading with her husband not to leave her alone in the house because she suspected the perpetrator might still be inside. Investigators found it peculiar that Robert had left his wife alone at the crime scene without checking whether the assailant was still in the house or not. This raised suspicions that he might have known for certain that she was safe and that the assailant had already left the premises. As a result, Investigators decided to scrutinize Robert more closely, shifting the focus of the investigation in this direction and searching for additional evidence. During their investigation, detectives discovered that Robert had unrestricted access to the Lin family home, as he had a key to it. Furthermore, he had a motive for committing the crime. After moving to North Epping, Robert struggled to establish himself in a business and had to work as an employee for Mein Lin. Following the Lin family's death, all of their assets were transferred to Brenda, but as she was only 15 years old at the time, the legal guardianship of the girl meant that Kathy and Robert had control over all the family's assets and business. Police learned that almost immediately after taking custody of Brenda, Robert pressured Mein Lin's parents to vacate the house that Min Lin had purchased for them. Police suspected that Robert, humiliated by his own failures and driven by jealousy, harbored a plan to seize the fortune accumulated by the Lin family through years of hard work. Despite Robert being the primary suspect in the case, the police only had suspicions against him. In the hope of obtaining more substantial evidence, investigators installed surveillance cameras in his residence as part of a covert operation that continued for 6 months. In May 2010, during another round of questioning with Kathy, investigators intentionally broached the topic of the bloody shoe prints found in the house. She disclosed that Robert wore Asics shoes in size 9.5. This revelation was a breakthrough for the investigation because the Asics shoe model was rare, as it had been discontinued in 2005, and these shoe prints were discovered at the crime scene. Just a few days after this, Robert was caught on hidden cameras inside his home, cutting up several Asics shoe boxes, moistening the torn cardboard bits in a bucket of water, and flushing them down the toilet. Armed with this information from the surveillance cameras, the police obtained a search warrant for Robert's house. During the search, investigators discovered a stain marked as number 91 on the garage floor beneath a chest of drawers. Subsequent laboratory analysis revealed that this stain was human blood containing a complex mixture of DNA, including at least 4 out of the 5 victims. Experts also determined that the composition of this stain matched the blood found in the victim's house. On May 5, 2011, almost 2 years after the committed crime, Robert was arrested and charged with first-degree murder. He was remanded in custody without the possibility of bail. His trial did not begin until May 2014, and he pleaded not guilty to the charges against him. The prosecution presented a wealth of new evidence against Robert. One of the most crucial pieces of evidence in the case was the testimony of an informant from prison who revealed that while awaiting trial, Robert had confessed to him. He admitted that on the night of the murders, to leave his house without his wife noticing, he had given her a large dose of sedatives. Additionally, he shared that he had purchased the murder weapon, a hammer, from a budget store in town, knowing that the store had dummy surveillance cameras, ensuring there would be no evidence of the purchase. Robert also confessed to his cellmate that he had struggled to dispose of the hammer for a while, fearing he might be caught on surveillance camera recordings. Robert's defense attempted to convince the jurors to disregard these testimonies, suggesting that the witness may have had ulterior motives, such as reducing their own prison sentence in exchange for their testimony. In the end, the entire body of evidence came down to the informant's words against Robert's consistent denials. Despite the compelling evidence in the case, it seemed like the trial might fall apart and the court would not reach a verdict. However, a sudden and unpleasant revelation during the trial changed the course of the investigation. Brenda confessed to her attorney that Robert had subjected her to sexual abuse for many years, starting when he and his wife moved to Sydney and her family was still alive. When the girl moved into his home after her parents' death, his advances only intensified. This revelation led to the suspension of the trial for further investigation and the uncovering of these newly disclosed facts. Several months later, in August 2014, the second trial began. The prosecution now argued that Robert was driven not only by jealousy and greed, but also by a sexual obsession with his niece. Despite all the evidence against Robert, the defense continued to assert that he was a victim of public pressure on the police. They also cast doubt on the nature and timing of the garage bloodstain, suggesting that it could have entered the garage floor after Robert and Kathy discovered the bodies at the crime scene, and Robert might have accidentally stepped on blood while wearing the same shoes. Ultimately, this trial was postponed due to the judge's illness. In February 2015, the third trial began, which again led to no conclusive verdict as the jurors failed to reach a unanimous decision. In December of the same year, Robert was released on bail after spending nearly 5 years in prison without a conviction. The fourth trial began in June 2016, and once again, the jurors could not reach a unanimous decision. It wasn't until January 12, 2017, during the fifth hearing of the case, that the court delivered a guilty verdict, sentencing Robert to 5 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole. In June 2020, Robert filed an appeal, which was denied in February 2021. He is currently behind bars, but has never admitted his guilt in committing this crime. Friends, please share your opinions in the comments. Do you think Robert is guilty of this crime or not? If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. Thank you for watching.